G'day, guys. This is another episode of Jay. A chat with Jay. I've got marbles in my mouth because I'm looking forward to speaking to this man. It's remove your mask, write your story, and writing story is exactly what we're doing today. We're talking to my publisher, the book that I wrote, Journey of a Whitefeather, Remove Your Mask, Write Your Story. This is the man, and this is the company that I worked with, and I can't speak more highly of the process that these wonderful people helped me through. It's a bit of a scary process, I'm not going to lie, but writing a book and having it actually in your hand after they do all the work, man. But this is Les, production coordinator at Busybird Publishing.
Thanks for having me on.
And a wrestling fan, of course.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for having a chat, Les, because I mean, I've had a lot of people come up to me and talk about, wow, you wrote a book. How hard was it? What was going on? I thought, nah, let's going to get you on board and have a chat about what a wonderful process you guys did. You and Kev, I want to do a big shout out. You guys, were absolutely nothing but superb in every single word and every single process that you put us through or put me through when I was doing my book. So thank you so first of all, thank you so much. And do you want to go and tell us a little bit about Busybird and yourself to start with?
Yeah, so Busybird's been around for about 25 years, but initially it was a design company and it transitioned into publishing in the early or late 2000s, like 2009, 2010. It was initially run by Blaze Van Heck, who's married to Kev Howlett. She was really big on legacy and getting, helping people tell their stories. She felt like everyone had a story to tell, and it was just it was a case of finding a way to tell that story. Tragically, she passed away unexpectedly back in early 22, and Kev took over, in terms of being in charge of the place, but we're still maintaining her legacy, still trying to help people get their stories out there. Still, for us, it's always about holding the author's hand. We don't want it to be a frightening experience as much as it does seem like it's going to be frightening and daunting. At the end of the day, we want the author holding up a book and being 100% happy with the book and 100% happy with the process.
Absolutely. And I think what I found was obviously I walked in thinking, oh my God, I've written all these words, and I obviously wrote my poetry book, which you'll see come up very, very soon. I wrote all these words. I'm thinking, oh, how's this all going to work? But the process that you went through with me was absolutely superb.
I mean, just a backstep there. I mean, you're the one to be commended because you actually wrote it. A lot of people talk about writing a book thinking it's easy. It's just going to be a spill, get it on the page, it'll all be fine. A lot of people talk about it. Not a lot of people actually finish it from beginning to end. With writing, I'm sure you experienced that at the start, you got all the excitement, all the enthusiasm. It's going to be a great journey. And then at some point through it, you're going to start feeling, what am I doing? Is this any good? You're going to have all those self-doubts. And a lot of people just abandon it at that point. But, you actually wrote the book from beginning to end. So that's, the story starts with you. So to get your words on the page, and obviously for you, because, I was at your launch and listening to you talk about it. And I think this is the case of writing. Writing is very much about telling your own experiences. Now, whether you tell it through poetry or through fiction or whatever, there's always a reinterpretation of ourselves through our words. And it takes a lot of courage for people to showcase that vulnerability inside themselves. I mean, you talked about that a lot. You talked about being in a dark place. So to actually, I think writing really helps people make sense of what's going on inside their heads and, make sense of their feelings. And the thing I think is really, really important, we've always thought it's really important at Busybird, is your words can help other people. And the great thing about a book can travel where you can't. Your book could be picked up in the US, in the UK, wherever it is. People could connect to you through your book and they can learn something. And I think that's the most important thing. We all have a journey through life. We all have experiences. And if you can take the stuff that was negative in your life, the stuff that was potentially destructive, and use that to help other people, it puts a constructive, redefinition of what you're going through. You're helping others through your own experiences. And I always think that's worthwhile.
Absolutely. I mean, I found, obviously, I wrote a fair bit when I was in that bad place, just to give people a run of what happened. I mean, obviously through the pandemic and we were locked down. That's where it all sort of started, came together. We've got putting together a lot of stuff, I guess, deliberately in a lot of ways. Like you write stuff and you go, okay. But then, as I said, a friend of mine, Cortez Medford from England, he's the one who goes, you got to write this thing and get it published, my friend. So, and this is where the journey started. I have to say a big thank you to Psycho Kid Thunder, Konchevsky. I'll give you a big plug, my friend, with your books. I mean, if it wasn't for you, mate, I wouldn't have met these wonderful people. And yeah, I mean, yeah, all I can say is thank you so much. Can you tell us a little bit about how many authors you've
Oh,
done?
we've done about 1,000 books, so it's got to be, I don't know,
Wow.
I don't know the exact count, but I mean, some authors have done multiple books, so it's going to be over 900 authors. I mean, a big thing too is I always say we're a creative business run by creative people for creative people. I've been a
Mhm.
writer for nearly 40 years. Kev Howlett, he's been an illustrator and photographer for just as long. His wife Blaze is also a writer. So when we talk to authors, we're always talking to you guys, and we're trying to treat you the way we'd expect to be treated. The positions are reversed. I mean, you've come into the studio. You can see we're very casual. We're very laid back. You're greeted at the door by Labrador. It's all very chilled and relaxed. There's nothing corporate about us, and we just tell you the truth from the beginning. There's a lot of places who'll just lie outrageously to you to get your business. We want to make sure that authors know, in terms of writing a book. I mean, that's just a journey in itself, but then getting it out there, that's something that you got to constantly persevere with. It doesn't just happen. And,
Mhm.
you're great at that side of it, in actually marketing yourself, promoting yourself, and making sure people know that you and your words exist.
Exactly. I think it's about the branding of yourself as well. But I mean, as you were talking to me about, getting your words out, I think it's just a real, um, I guess a prize or a dream or a real accomplishment. Even just to get the book out, I think would you find a lot of people just want to get their book out just for a personal goal, maybe not just even like
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
marketing and stuff, but
yeah, yeah. I mean, look, the financial remuneration should be the very last motivation. It should really be able because you have a story to share with people, whatever that story is. Whether it's as yourself, personal experience, or whether someone's writing fiction, or whether someone's writing non-fiction about a particular topic. You have something you want to share with people, and it is so strong that you cannot just contain it within yourself, and it becomes a passion. So it's not easy for, like I said, I've seen a lot of people start with enthusiasm and then as that wanes, they just find it too hard.
yeah,
So, and the other thing too, like going back to what you've done, the stuff you've written, I find a lot of people actually struggle to bear themselves to people because they don't want people to see them when they're weak or when they're vulnerable, when they're in their worst, and I
absolutely.
think but that's where you connect with people because you show people that side of yourself and they realize, okay, whatever I'm going through, this person's gone through and they've gotten through it. And if they can get through it, I can get through it. Circumstances might change, but the actual emotional state of where we are, where we, feel we're like, totally in despair and it's like what's the way out and all you can see is darkness and then you have a story speak to you and give you that little glimmer of hope and that's enough to use it as a beacon that out of there.
Absolutely. I'd say to one a message, a story, a teaching, a message lesson or teaching is always something. One word, one verse can change someone's life.
Yeah.
Let's get on to you, my friend. What about yourself? You give us a little bit of a background on yourself, and then we'll get talking about the great publishing a book, the great thing of publishing a book.
Okay,
Let's talk
yeah.
about yourself.
So I've been writer for 37 years, I think it is. Probably a little bit longer if you count like, when I was a teen and scribbling away. Always from when I was a kid, I knew I just wanted to tell stories. That was just the burning drive inside me. Met Kev's wife, Blaze, when we were both studying publishing about 20 years ago or something. And we had a similar dream to actually, help people tell their stories, but it was also we're coming at it from the writer's perspective. For myself, I've had 6 books published. I've had screenplays optioned. I had, a bunch of screenplays placed in international comps and stuff like that. So, for me, I really understand when people sit down opposite me and they exhibit that passion to tell a story, to tell their story, because that's something I've felt for years. And I really like when I see people, um, there's this natural tendency to want to get stuff out as quick as possible. And that always makes me tense up a little bit because I know and I've experienced it, and I've done it myself when I was younger, is like the moment you say, I'm pretty much done with this, about a day later, you'll have all these new ideas for what should go in the book. And I actually like,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I actually like what you did because you took your time with it, and I always appreciate that a lot more because it's like you want to get it right. You don't just want to release something out into the world. You want to get it as right as you possibly can. So I totally understand, what authors go through when they feel like, okay, I've nearly got it there, but I'm not quite ready. And I appreciate that they're trying to make it somewhere better. So in terms of like, I wasn't that busy during the two pandemic years, for obvious reasons. But then, like I said, in 2022, early 2022, Kev's wife Blaze passed away, and Kev asked me back, and it was very much like, hey, could we make this work without her? Because she was such a shining light for that business. She was really the face of it, and people, if you met her, you just felt her compassion and her empathy. So for us, it was a bit of a rocky road that first year or so, just to reorient the business while we're trying to work out, how do we do this? And she was such a one-woman show in terms she did so much, so we had to actually split up what she did among different people. But in terms of like me, I can now see, because when I used to work for her, she used to talk about this, but now I can see myself and I can feel that joy when I see an author hold up their book at the end of their journey, and talk with passion about it and with pride about it. So for myself, like I love stories, always love stories. I think they're the most important thing in the world. And we've been sharing them for millennia. You go back to cave drawings and stuff like that,
Yeah,
or people passing on stories word of mouth. And the reason we pass on stories is because we can learn from it. We can all, have something to share.
absolutely. Look at the dream time. You talk about the First Nations people with the dream time on the rocks, and
Yeah,
talk about the Native Americans back over, obviously in America, and the First Nations in Canada, maybe the Vikings back in the Nordic era down back in Norway. So many ways. We so many ways we can actually express ourselves. Let's talk about getting this book done. Now, I've got a couple of things that I've written down that I will just shoot to you, that I found very interesting and very important in a way, and I want your
yep,
comments on them. Um, I'll give you a quick Q and A. I'm talking about copyright, trademarking, pricing. Amazon. I'll talk about Amazon.
yep,
People worry about the prices. It's a lot. Editing, pictures, copyright on pictures,
yep.
all those little things. Even when I was writing my book and I had a lot of those acknowledgements in the back, I couldn't use the acknowledgement of the full name unless I got a signed waiver, because if you're making money off it, you have to
Yeah.
get a signed waiver. This was these little things that people don't realize.
Yeah, I mean, social media sort of makes it murky because a lot of people are just sharing stuff through social media, and they think because you can just share stuff, then it's all free to distribute. But as you said, if you're making money, if it becomes a commercial venture, and now you're profiting off someone else's work, some picture that they've taken, you're actually impinging on their right to make money from their own work. So stuff like images, don't feel you can just download them off the net and they're free to use. You'd have to find the copyright holder. Usually that will be the photographer, but sometimes if the photographer was looking for a publisher, that might be the publisher who owns the rights. So you have to actually get permission to use these pictures. You can't just grab them from anywhere and use them. Similarly with, things like exercises, if you're doing some sort of non-fiction book, you can't just grab a bunch of text from someone else's book and stick it in your own book. And you definitely can't just take it and reword it like it's Year 10 English and just change a few words around and use it. So you have to be very aware of the things you can and can't use. But it's always a case of if you're grabbing something from somewhere else for whatever, whether it's text, whether it's an image, it's best to get permission. Song lyrics really just about impossible to get the permission to use them, and that'd be expensive. That's not to say that people haven't done it, but when you look at the people who've done it, they've generally been the Stephen Kings and that, they're really, big authors. Because we tend to get a lot of people who want to use song lyrics, not realizing they just can't grab them and use them.
That's right.
Uh, yeah, and same with poetry, but there is something called public domain. So, like, if you wanted to use a poem from an author who died 70 years ago, that falls into something called public domain, which means you can use it. So, copyright expires 70 years after the author's death in
Is it
Australia.
70 or
Yeah, 70, yeah. Yep. So if you look at something like internationally, it varies a little bit in terms of the time frame, but it's around there. So if you look at something like, I don't know if you've seen or read the book or seen the book, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
Yeah, I've heard
So
of that one.
yeah, so it's a Jane Austen book, which is a classic. But because it had fallen into public domain, that author could grab it and rewrite the book and then stick zombies in it. So if things are old, then you can use them in the case of public domain. But it's always best to speak to either a publisher or an editor, and if you're unclear about whether you can use it, to try and track it back to its source.
I'd like to take this time to shout out our supporters at Liberty Bullion, the best gold, silver, and platinum traders in Melbourne, even Australia. If you want to give them a call, their knowledge, their customer service is second to none. Back to the show. Yeah, we've got that's very, very important. I mean, I found that to be the most important thing. All my photos that I've taken are from my camera.
Yep.
So I got pictures with Bret Hart, Lucky Lawless. Got those two. I got pictures with The Rock and all those, but they come off my camera.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason I use them. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, I mean, they're your pictures because you own the rights. But I mean, the other thing too, if a lot of those, not all those guys, they're public figures too. So it sort of changes a little bit, because they are so commonly photographed. It's not like, you went into someone's household, some stranger, and took a picture with them and want to use it. That would be like really impinging on their privacy. So public figures, it tends to be a little bit different in the way it works. If Bret Hart, not saying he would, but like if Bret Hart said, I really don't want you to use that picture, it probably wouldn't be an issue. You could still use it because it came from your camera, as you said, but then it just sort of gets a little bit murky. But again, with public figures, I mean, going back to, I don't know if I should bring up the Pamela Anderson case from years ago, the judge ruled that that tape could be usable and saleable because she was a public figure, which was ridiculous. So
yeah, that was ridiculous. I mean, I
yeah.
look at it that way. That was stolen.
Yeah.
So I still am dumbfounded on that one because, as I said, I'm very particular, and that's why we want to make sure, ladies and gentlemen, because we go on to sort of talk about copyright, talk about trademarking is one way you can protect your work, or protect your names of your book. I've trademarked all my names, which you can do through IP Australia, and also got IP Australia and also other trademarking around the world. That will give you a 10 to 15 years worth. You own the actual name, like it's a TM. If you know TM, R, and C, you pay for the R, and it's not that much anyway. It's about in Australia, it's about 250, up between 250 and 500, depending on which route you want to go.
Yeah, it's straight to copyright's automatic. Once you put pen to paper and you write, that belongs to you. In the US, they formalize they've got a copyright agency where you can actually lodge things. So it depends. I mean, and you can do that from here too. You could lodge it with the US Copyright Office because we're living in a digital space. But technically, once you put pen to paper, that belongs to you. It's your copyright. And then obviously when you start putting books out there and that, now there's a legal record of your work out there publicly. And it's protection itself. Like, someone was to rip off one of your poems and publish it tomorrow. Well, we can go back a couple of months to when your book came out. We can show that your book was out there already with that poem. So once your book actually goes out there, it pretty much protects you from plagiarism and stuff like that. That's not to say it wouldn't happen. I don't think it happens as much as people fear, though. It does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't. But like that's one of the biggest fears that a lot of authors ask me about is like, how do I protect my work? What if someone rips it off? And it's like, I mean, the flip side of that too is if someone really wanted to rip you off, they're going to do it. How are they going to do it? But the thing you need to think about too is if someone's going to rip you off, and even if it was someone well known, for example, and then you're obviously going to raise legal action against them, that's not going to look good for them. Then they're going to spend time and money having to fight that and all that. So that's actually going to hurt them. Trademarks are a little bit different because that's more of a, things that you can use that can become identified with you and become iconic with you, which then other people can't use. And really, best examples are things like Nike, Just Do It. That's trademarked. Coke has their own trademark around. I forgot what it was, but the slogan that goes with Coke. So stuff like that. That's it. Yeah, that's it. So that's worth trademarking because it could be something that's really saleable, and if it doesn't belong to you, it's not trademarked to you, then people can be profiting of something you've come up with.
I think, it's a big thing. And well, all we can advise you, ladies and gentlemen, you can quite happily DM myself. I'm happy to talk a bit about copyright and trademark, but also I know Les and the guys down at Busybird, they'll be able to direct you to those kind of things. They will ask those questions. Editing, what people talk about editors. We've got my editor, Peter Simons. He was a good friend of mine. I'll give him a bit of a plug. He did a wonderful job on the book.
I met him at your launch. He's a lovely guy, yeah.
Yeah, lovely guy.
Also met Batman at your launch.
Yeah, well, we won't tell anyone that what I do. Well, I'm secretly, I've got a secret identity. Hint, hint. Robin. Anyway, but what do you look for in an editor, my friend? Do you obviously offer editing services? I work with obviously Peter, but what do you offer in that way? What do you look for in an editor?
Actually, all our editors come through our internship program. So we occasionally, like Peter, we're talking to him. We do occasionally get an overflow and use other editors, but we like them coming through our internship program because then we know how good they are and what their strengths are. In terms of editing, you really need someone who's got a clinical eye and who understands the author's voice. Too many people, when they come to editing, they say, you should try this, try that, try this. And it's like, but that's not what the author's doing. The author's doing something totally different. You're doing it the way you would do it.
Yeah.
So an editor needs to actually understand, okay, this is the author's vision. How do I help them realize their vision? And how do I challenge them to get more out of themselves, get more out of their storytelling? And then you're looking at the more technical sides like the punctuation, the grammar, the spelling, and all that sort of stuff. Editing is a really, really difficult vocation. We always shudder when someone comes in and says, don't worry, it's been edited. My husband, my neighbor, my dog, teaches English, so they know how to edit. And we go, oh, okay. So like when someone comes in and says, I've got my own editor and that person's actually an editor, it's like, okay, we're comfortable with that. But when other people says, oh, my partner read it and they're good at this stuff, it's like, okay, that's a bit of a worry. So with editing, you really want some people who are studious but can also read volumes of material and actually digest it and actually see where it's working, where it's not working, and also understand the author's voice and also understand the author because authors, everyone's different. You get different personalities. You get some who are very protective of their work. You get some who are just like, no, do whatever you need to do. You get some who are insecure. You get some who are very needy. There's all sort of different personalities. So the editor doesn't only just read the work, they need to read the author and understand how do I talk to them and develop a rapport that's going to work best with them. And that's going to be different from author to author. Like I said, sometimes you get authors who they might not have been edited before, so they tend to be very protective of their work. So the other thing we really teach the editors is like, if you make suggestions, you need to explain why you're making that suggestion. Why does it work? Why doesn't it work? Why doesn't it work? Why could this possibly make it better?
It's well, as I said, it's a very interesting point you make. I mean, you've got to really understand what the person's all about, and I think that really comes from like the forward or like when I wrote the forward for my book, you could see where it was going. I think, and I mean I'm only talking about myself here. I mean, it's very important that you have someone that has a chat. What are you looking to do with the book? Like when I spoke to Peter, I said, and obviously I knew him for quite a few years. Obviously, we've worked together, and I said, look, this is a poetry about the dark side when I was in the hole. He goes, okay, and then when he looked, he goes, okay, great. That's how we'll look at it. There's a few changes he's made, but he wanted to keep my authentic voice the way I was speaking at the time. It didn't, and there's a lot of them that didn't make sense. He said, look, we'll change it here and there, but it wasn't much as it was because of the fact it was thoughts on the day. So it did make it a little bit easier. But you probably find that people who write like paragraphs, like say Con's book, will be a little bit different. How do you differentiate between say poetry, biographies, and non-fiction?
So we use different editors for poetry, and we have ones who specialize more in fiction and others who specialize in non-fiction. So the poetry editor, Crystal, like everyone who's used has loved her because she just really understands their voice, and then she can help flesh it out from the perspective of what does poetry need to realize the author's fullest potential in what they're trying to do, and then she understands all the technical aspects of poetry. I mean, I've worked as an editor. I don't get any of that. With fiction and non-fiction, it's you're editing on a micro level and a macro level because you're looking at like what's each paragraph doing? What's each chapter doing? But then you're looking at like, well, how do they function in the body of the whole story? Because a chapter might be 2,000 words, but there might be 80,000 words in the story. So,
Right.
and sometimes with the editing, like when I used to edit, for example, the first round would just be to read everything and just to familiarize myself with where the story's going, where things are pointing. And, the second time I'd know, okay, well, this bit in chapter 4 didn't make sense to me when I first read it, but there's a payoff in chapter 10.
Yep.
Does that work? Do we need to strengthen it? So I always sort of say with not, I mean, fiction and non-fiction, I think every form of writing is storytelling. So whatever the form is some sort of story trying to communicate. Even things like instructions, like if you go buy a flat pack from IKEA and you find the instructions in there, they're telling the story of how to assemble whatever you've bought. So I think everything has a purpose. So like with the editing, it's like understanding what the author's trying to do, getting their voice, and then looking at how does their content, how well does it serve the message that they're trying to promote, and what does it need to help them do that better, and what are their strengths and weaknesses. And we all have strengths and weaknesses as writers, and you'll see that like, some people aren't great at dialogue, but they might be great at description or stuff like that. And with writing, while you obviously want to improve all your areas of storytelling, you still are playing to your strengths. There's no point, if someone's not great at description and is very rudimentary, not great going to them and saying, hey, let's put in tons more description for your book. If that's not your strength, it's like, let's play to your strength. What are your strengths? Might be the character interaction or the plotting or whatever the case. Let's ramp that up because that'll carry the rest of it. So it's really understanding, yeah, like I said, what the content's trying to do and help them realize their vision to its fullest potential.